Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, a man accused of working for a notorious Gambian death squad run by former President Yahya Jammeh goes on trial in Germany on the principle of universal jurisdiction. Bai Lowe is accused of murdering renowned journalist Deyda Hydara in 2004. Also, African leaders congratulate French President Emmanuel Macron on his re-election, but beyond the diplomatic best wishes on the ground, many Africans feel pretty unconcerned about the former colonial power's race for the top job. And Nigerian authorities say that they have no choice but to bury the remains of over 100 victims of an explosion in a mass grave. The victims died in a blast at an illegal refinery the government has called a catastrophe. But first, a man accused of working as a driver for a notorious Gambian death squad went on trial in Germany on Monday, accused of crimes against humanity and murder. 46-year-old Bai Lowe appeared in the court in the town of Celle over, amongst others, the assassination of respected journalist Deyda Hydara in 2004. Hydara worked as a correspondent for AFP and Reporters Without Borders during the rule of feared former dictator Yahya Jammeh. He also ran an independent local paper in which he penned a widely read political column titled Good Morning, Mr. President. Lowe's trial is the first prosecution of human rights violations committed under Jammeh and is being pursued under the principle of universal jurisdiction. Arnaud Froger is RSF's Africa director and tells me more about how Deyda Hydara's death affected Gambians at the time.
Well, the news of his assassination surely came as a shock in the Gambia. Deyda was not only a famous and prominent journalist, he was really a leading figure in the country's civic space. And when RSF went to Banjul only 3 days after he was shot dead, everyone knew it was Jammeh's regime death squad who did it, but no one really expected they would target such an important public figure. So Deyda was gone, and fear was really palpable at the time. It really changed everything in the Gambia.
So why is this trial of Bai Lowe a landmark case?
Well, that's what universal jurisdiction is all about, to make sure that high-level criminals have no safe haven to turn to and can face justice, may they try to escape it by fleeing their own country. Now, one of Jammeh's former interior ministers is under investigation in the U.S. One of the former junglers is also, detained in Switzerland. So, not to forget Yahya Jammeh himself went into exile in Equatorial Guinea. It's absolutely key that this man can face justice for all the atrocities he ordered and committed during the 20 years he ruled the country.
Now, Lowe's the third person to be detained outside of the Gambia for crimes allegedly committed under Jammeh's authority. The first to actually face trial. But when it comes to those still in Gambia, does this trial make it more likely that perpetrators might face justice there?
Well, we may assume that, if Germany is setting the example of a fair and historic trial, then the Gambia will be left with no other choice than to get justice for its own people. So one of Deyda Hydara's jungler was arrested in the Gambia, but he was then freed after he testified before the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission. So it's essential that those implicated in Deyda Hydara's murders and other murders do not go unpunished at all, even if they have come forward.
So tell us a bit more about the junglers that Lowe's supposed to have been a member of.
But that's a death squad, basically. It was directly set up by President Yahya Jammeh himself. We don't know how many men were working within this death squad, but there were many, and they are accused of having committed many atrocities, murders, killings, and sometimes torture in secret detention facilities. And one of these junglers, the driver, is currently, as you have said, prosecuted and tried in Germany.
Arnaud Froger, the Africa Director of Reporters Without Borders. Now, the body of former Kenyan President Mwai Kibaki was laid out in state in the Parliament buildings in Nairobi on Monday. Kibaki, who served as the country's third president from December 2002 to April 2013, died aged 90 last week. His rule saw Kenya's most violent election in its history, when more than 1,100 people died in clashes after disputed polls in 2007. But he's also remembered by many for the birth of a new constitution, an end to dictatorship, and the revival of the economy. He'll be given a state funeral with full military honours next week. The African Union's congratulated French President Emmanuel Macron on his re-election on Sunday. Commission Chief Moussa Faki Mahamat has said that he hopes to keep boosting relations between the continent and France. During his first term, Macron had said that he wanted to break with his country's colonial past, and his return as leader has been welcomed by several African nations.
Emmanuel Macron is an ally.
He's one of the few presidents, if not the only president, to do so much to normalize diplomatic relations with Rwanda. We've seen the result firsthand. An ambassador was named, French professors came, and both in a short amount of time. Just think about what will happen over the course of this mandate. He's one of our allies in Europe.
But Macron's time in office has also seen a rise in anti-French sentiment in some former French colonies. Sam Brad Peace tells us more about the nuanced response to Macron's win across West Africa.
There's been a real mixed reaction to Emmanuel Macron's presidential win in West Africa. You've had leaders of countries like Senegal, Ivory Coast, Niger coming out and issuing public statements of support for Macron, congratulating a man who they see as an important economic and military ally in the region. On the other hand, when you speak to people here in the streets of Dakar, many were completely indifferent as to the French presidential election result. Others, a surprising number actually, regretted the fact that the far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen, didn't win. This is not because of her policies, but more because she's perceived as being an anti-establishment figure and representing a break with the past. Elsewhere in the region, notably in the Sahel, reaction to Macron's victory has been really quite muted. There's been no real official response from Mali or Burkina Faso. One Burkinabe newspaper this morning, and remember, this is a country where relations have soured with France in recent years. One newspaper said that the next 5 years of Macron's presidency represented a chance to rebuild the tattered relationships between France and the continent.
Sam Brad Peace there for us. Now, Nigerian authorities are preparing to bury victims of an explosion at an illegal refinery in a mass grave. At least 110 people died in Friday's blast in an accident that's been declared a national disaster. Laurent Berstecker has more.
Scenes of chaos and destruction after a massive blast at this illegal oil refinery in southeast Nigeria. Walking among the wreckage and charred bodies, teams of rescuers were attempting to identify the victims, many of whom were burnt beyond recognition.
We have to do mass burial very close to this place. That is between now and tomorrow. We've agreed with the chairman of the local government so they can do mass burial. Because obviously, cannot identify the bodies. They're badly charred, you know. Then the next thing will be to fumigate the area.
The blast was triggered after a fire spread to a fuel storage area, catching dozens of workers in the explosion. Calling it a national disaster, President Muhammadu Buhari ordered security forces to intensify their clampdown on illegal refineries. These types of facilities have become a chronic challenge in southern Nigeria as shady operators attempt to curb regulations and taxes. Yet many residents say these refineries will continue to exist as long as the root cause isn't addressed. Widespread poverty and unemployment pushing millions of young Nigerians into criminal activities.
Life is too painful here, and everybody, you can see here, both women, children, and the youth, they resort to any means to survive.
Beyond the immediate risk, these refineries also represent an environmental hazard and are a major source of air pollution. Earlier this month, a national task force created to curb oil theft said it busted over 30 illegal facilities in under 2 weeks.
Well, Monday, the 25th of April, marks World Malaria Day. Kenya had made major strides in reducing the number of cases in the country. There are an estimated 3.5 million infections there and about 10,700 deaths every year. But the COVID-19 pandemic has hampered efforts, and researchers have had to pivot quickly to try and find efficient and cheaper ways of testing for malaria. Our correspondent sent us this report.
This malaria test that has just been developed by Kenyan scientists costs about 50 euro cents. It is 5 times cheaper than imported testing kits used in the past. Kenya needs about 15 million units a year, which will now come at a lower cost as they are locally produced.
Kenya is the leading, now is the first one that has produced a malaria kit, not only in East Africa, in the African continent. As I said, most of the countries have been importing. We import, we get from Korea, China, from other countries. But now having this is going to serve the African region.
In this room, scientists are breeding different types of mosquitoes for research. They are conducting studies on the malaria vaccine, developing insecticides, and sequencing the parasite's DNA to track drug resistance. The lab shares their findings with other countries in the region.
We have been in constant communication with governments of Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, where the resistance towards diagnostic kits is happening. We're in constant communication just to let them know what is your situation over there. If the situation is over there, what kind of a resistance are you finding?
Sharing information among African countries is one of the agendas of the African Leaders Malaria Alliance. Chaired by Kenya's president, the coalition is advocating on the rest of the continent to implement policies Kenya is using successfully.
I strongly believe that we are on the path to defeat malaria. We have seen very good progress. We have seen almost a 50% reduction in the prevalence of malaria. So for me, I see that there will be regions in Kenya where we will move almost to eliminating malaria, but there will be regions that we will have to do a lot more work to be able to reduce the burden of malaria.
The alliance has set a goal of eradicating malaria in endemic countries by 2030, a goal which is hard to achieve, but according to Kenyan officials, things seem to be on track for their nation.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.